All right, we are back with week 11 of the Osceola Tailgate show. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm joined by former FSU offensive lineman Mark Salva and Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein, as always. Guys, FSU gets ready to take on Louisiana, the Ragin Cajuns, at noon on Saturday in a game where they are a prohibitive favorite, 24 points to be exact. And we'll get into a little bit about that game later. But first, let's just go back. We've had almost a week to marinate and another blowout win, another win on the road in dominating fashion, 38-3 against Syracuse. And Mark, you and I have talked about it, so I'll start with Fish. Fish, just your overall thoughts on the Syracuse game. What did you think going in, and what did you think coming out of that thing?
Well, I almost feel like these coaches and players listen to this show because we said they needed to get out to a fast start. They got out to a fast start. We said they basically needed to put their foots on this team's throats. They put their foot on their throat. They did what they needed against a team. I don't want to say they're a bad team because they started off the year on a great note, and they're banged up. I mean, they're really beat up. They lost a lot of guys. Schrader wasn't to the same point that he's been at the last 2 years, but they beat the team how good teams are supposed to win. We've discussed this before. When you're a good football team, you dominate teams that aren't as good as you. That's how you know you've become a good football team, is when you take care of jobs like that. They did a great job. They dominated on the offense, defense, special teams. Once again, it was a complete performance from start to finish. The last couple of years, we kept going, hey, why aren't they getting those? You saw them play a good first half, maybe a good second half, but not a full game. That was domination. And they got a lot of players in. They emptied the bench. They got experience for the younger guys. So it was a good win all the way around.
Mark, and we've watched this offense. We've watched this team get better and better every week. We do think, I think you and I both agree that Syracuse was a better football team than Miami or Georgia Tech, even though they were limited. Obviously, Schrader was not 100% healthy, didn't really attempt to run the ball. But FSU was dominated nonetheless on both sides of the ball. Just your last thoughts on the win over Syracuse as Florida State is now 7-3 and ranked 19th in the college football playoff poll, which we'll talk a little bit later in the show. But just your last thoughts on the Syracuse win.
Yeah. Fish said it, good teams take care of business in situations like this. And the situation in the last 3 weeks has been teams that are beat up, have severe quarterback issues, very, very flawed teams. Now, in the past, we'd sometimes struggle in these situations and eke out a win or, really, keep it done late. It wasn't the case these last 3 weeks. These games were done by half. FSU playing at a high level, coming out of the gate and really putting their foot on the throat of these opponents is what you should do. Am I under the illusion that we're a playoff caliber team and that kind of thing? You got to consider the competition and where the state that they're at. When we lost two of our most dominating defensive players, we struggled for 3 weeks. And until we got those guys back and got everybody healthy, now you see what we can be. And so it's just kind of the way it kind of fell. We're a good, really good football team playing at a high level, executing, doing the things good teams do, executing, penalties are few and far between, no missed tackles, blocking and tackling, all the fundamental things you want good football teams to do, FSU is doing. And so the results are what the results are. And it's the way it should be if you're a good football team. So yes, we are a good football team.
Yeah, well, listen, obviously, we thought this team would be much better than they are. Got a legitimate shot at 9 wins in the regular season. Almost certainly should come out with an 8th win this Saturday against Louisiana. Again, this is a very average football team from a lower tier group of 5 conference. Although Sun Belt's had some good teams over the last couple of years. But FSU finishes the ACC part of their schedule 5-3, can do no worse than a tie for second in the Atlantic. That should help their bowl status. They should get a top-tier ACC bowl coming out of the regular season. But Mark, I'll start with you on this. We talked a little bit about it on Seminole sidelines and first impressions. But what statement has Mike Norvell and his team delivered to the ACC at the end of his third year and going into what will be a very important offseason?
Well, I said it earlier. I think the respect for the spear on the helmet is back. You're going to get a great effort from a team that's well coached, and they're going to play hard, and you better bring your A game if you're going to beat this team. That's what they're saying right now. And, the future looks bright. Obviously, recruiting and transfer portal is going to play a part in what this team looks like moving forward. But for this current iteration of FSU football, I think, we have gotten our respect back within the league.
Fish, what about you? What do you think about what the message has Mike Norvell and his team delivered with a 5-3 ACC season?
Yeah, I think it shows, one, that if you have a competent coach in there that knows what he's doing, that Florida State should never be a bad football team. There's just too many players at their disposal. A lot of kids want to play at this school. And Norvell and those guys have tapped into that. They've brought in guys that understand how to win, and these guys have put it together. They've done a great job, and I do think they have the respect back from the rest of the ACC. I've always said this: if you want everybody to shut up about recruiting or your performance on the field, win games. That's how you get over it. You don't want the media to talk bad about you. Win ball games. That's the only way that you're going to get people's respect, and that's what they've done. They've won, and look, you don't hear any negative talk around that program right now, and that's because, like I said, they're winning ball games.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you. Listen, obviously that the winning also helps take care of you on the recruiting trail. I think we'll see the dividends of that as we get into early National Signing Day and then to the traditional National Signing Day in February. But yeah, Mark, I agree with you. I think there's people look at the team differently than they have. I think even the way our impressions of the team are different. I think that the brand is coming back. I think that they're still not at the point where they can roll that helmet out and beat anybody. But I remember talking to Brad Lawing, a guy, longtime college football coach, when he came to Florida and then went to Florida State after his stint in Gainesville. But I asked him about, there were a lot of programs at the time that were in transition in the state of Florida, and he made the comment to me, and it's always stuck with me, that it really should only take you 3 years to turn around a program in the state of Florida with the access to the recruiting that you have in Florida, South Georgia, South Alabama, even Louisiana. So they're all 6 hours away from New Orleans. But he always thought it should take around 3 years to get it turned around, and that's what we've seen. 8-3 or 7-3, fixing to be 8-3 after this weekend, and with a legitimate shot to win 9 ball games. So yeah, I think that winning takes care of everything, and they seem to be on schedule. Mark, has this been about what your timetable was for getting this thing turned around? Have some real positive energy in year 3?
Honestly, there was a time when I didn't know if it could be done. Honestly, I mean, we were so bad at one point. Of course, I knew we could, but yeah, I think 3 years sounds about right. It was just so much that had to be done with turning over the roster, changing the culture, getting players that were young, to stay and fight through it and see the results as redshirt sophomores, juniors coming through. And I think that's what we got. You look at guys like Maurice Smith and Rob Scott, guys like that, guys like our defensive linemen, defensive players that have been with the program these last 3 years. That's the core of this team, and that's the ones that fought through it, that stuck with the message with Coach Norvell, and fought through it. And now you're starting to see the result of all that work, because it doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of dedication, and it takes having to get up off the ground a bunch of times, and those are the core guys that did it, and that I'm very appreciative of. It kind of reminds me of my time coming through. I got there in '84, and in '87, my senior year, started the dynasty run. It is just that the core. Everybody talks about the '85 team, but part of that core also was my class of guys like Pat Carter and Paul McGowan, Joey Ionata, Danny McManus was the class before, but that core group, along with the Deions and the Sammy Smiths and the Eric Hayeses and all those guys, Odell Higgins, that was the class after me. But that core group that struggled through 8-3 and 7-4. And then all of a sudden, the light comes on. I talked about that last week. Sometimes that light just comes on, and you know what it takes to win, and then you don't accept losing, and the standards are that much higher. And so I'm appreciative of those guys that I mentioned before on this team that have fought through it and really set the tone and the culture of this team moving forward. So now guys that come in moving forward, new recruits, transfers, what may be, understand what the standard of performance is, what the standard of work is every day. And that culture is now going to take hold, and you're going to see the results moving forward. And it's really good that now Clemson is starting to come back to the pack a little bit, gives us an opportunity, hopefully, to be a bigger force in the league moving forward.
Yep. Fish, final thoughts on that? Anything
No,
to add?
I agree. I just think a lot of times you got to be patient in this. Mark brought up Maurice Smith. Maurice Smith was a kid that was a developmental project when they brought him in. I thought he was very good. I like the fact that he was offered by BC and committed to them at the time. But fans get frustrated because they see that kid struggle as a freshman and sophomore. First off, he shouldn't have been playing at that time. He was forced to play. And that you saw the injuries. You saw him not be able to put on the weight because there was so much pressure on him just to play and perform. And that those guys aren't ready to play. And there's a lot of those guys. And then you look at a Pokey Wilson. Here's a guy that I'm a huge fan of. He could have quit the team. They brought in 4 other wide receivers. What did it do? It brought his play up. He's played well all year. You look at Lawrence Toafili. Here's a kid that could have quit when they brought in a Benson. Those guys are the ones that deserve a lot of credit because they went through all the bad. And that shows me that they made it through all the bad, that those are foundation players. That's the reason the team is where they're at right now.
100%.
And speaking of Maurice Smith, he was named ACC Offensive Lineman of the Week this week. So, along with Trey Benson was the running back of the week. I think that's 3 weeks in a row for Trey. So, this team is definitely rolling right now. They're getting all kinds of superlatives, and this has been. We thought this team was going to be fun to watch during before the season even started. They certainly have, and of course, have 2 more games to go, and that starts on Saturday with the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns, 5-5 overall in the year, 3-4 in the Sun Belt. This is Florida State's a 24-point favorite, guys. You can't, we're putting lipstick on a pig here. This is a game that Florida State should win. Louisiana's most impressive win, if you're looking for transitive property stuff, they beat Marshall, who beat Notre Dame. So that is their best win. They beat Marshall 23-13. I don't know who you would say their worst loss is. They did win emphatically last week against Georgia Southern 36-17. I watched a little bit of that game, but this is a very average offensive football team. Really in the lower half of just about every statistical category. They're really good run on the run defense. They're 31st against the run, but only 75th against the pass. Don't make a lot of plays behind a line of scrimmage. It's a game that Florida State should listen. We hear it all the time, and it's coach speak, and but we hear it every week from just about every head coach in America. It's about us. It's about us. It's never about the opponent. We all know that's not true. But this week, I think it really is about Florida State and them taking care of themselves and taking care of business. Mark, what are your expectations in this ball game?
Well, winning is a habit, right? And some of the habits we formed over the last 3 weeks of coming out fast, taking care of business early in the game, scoring early, defense establishing themselves early. That's a good habit to be in. And if Florida State, if we come out and do that right from the get-go, this thing ought to look like the last couple of weeks to me. But that means you got to go in with the hyper focus as a team, as an individual player, the hyper focus of going in there and doing your job and doing it at a very, very high level. The standards of performance cannot wane in order for this to come out like we hope it comes out. So it should. I'd expect it to happen. Like I said, it's a habit. And the thing you want to do is get these guys in, get hold of the ball game, and get them out, right, and get ready for the state championship game.
That's right. Fish, what about you? What are your expectations?
I think we're trying to find, you try to find ways for them to perform bad or this or that in these type of games, and it gets to the point. I think this football team is dialed in right now, and I don't think they need to be. I think the coaches got them in a place where I think this team and the leaders on that team are running that team right now. The coaches have done their job. The players are basically doing their job, and I don't see anything coming out of this game other than if you're one of the walk-ons on the team, you may want your parents to show up this week so you have a shot to play.
Yeah, well, that may help get people in the stands with the noon kickoff against the 5-5 team against the Sun Belt. But listen, they were very good last year. Obviously, Billy Napier leaves. This is not the same team. They have some good players. They're very balanced on offense, exactly 50-50 run to pass, but their quarterback's not very efficient, under 60% completion percentage. They do have a really good wide receiver that's probably got some a pro future in his pro play in his future. Michael Jefferson, 6'4", 205. Very active on defense, better against the run than the pass, but you're right. I think it's all about Florida State coming out, getting up early. Don't give this team any reason to think that it has a chance. We've seen Florida State take the will of their last three opponents out by the end of the first half. I think that's what we'll see here, and I think that we'll see, as Mark said, start seeing some younger guys get in the game, try to keep the rest of your more veterans and more established guys, get them out of the game, keep them healthy for the game that will be next Friday against Florida. Mark, the one question I have for you is Michael Desmoreau is their head coach. This is his first year as a head coach. He's 5-5. He's really, outside of high school ball, has only he's a very young coach, did not start coaching until 2013. Played at Louisiana, was outstanding quarterback there for Mark Hudspeth. Started his career as an assistant for Hudspeth for 2 years, and then Billy Napier kept him on staff. Billy Napier obviously is the head coach at Florida. With Desmoreau being such a young coach, could the fact that you're playing a similar offense, and he learned a lot from Billy Napier, right? I mean, that's his biggest influence. That's who he's with the longest. Could that help Florida State in its preparation for Florida? Because you got to think that some of the nuances of his offense will reflect what Billy Napier does.
Yeah, I mean, if the schemes are the same, from what you're telling me, it sounds like they probably are. It's going to help in terms of what the guys see in front of them and the calls they got to make and the things, the structures that they see in the game. But the three technique for Louisiana is going to be a lot different from the three technique that Florida's going to play. And so even though they might line up in the same place and try to do the same kind of things, they're going to do it a lot differently, right? So in terms of that, there is carryover in what you see in maybe. But what I don't think you'll see is like how we attack this team is going to be much different than how we attack the week after. There's going to be different strengths and weaknesses for each one. The matchups that materialize based on personnel are going to be much, much different. So what you see is, in terms of a game plan, will be very different. But in terms of the players and what they see in our base schemes, you'll be able to see their communication and whatnot probably be about the same.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this question, Mark, because you can give our listeners and viewers some insight into this because you've coached on short weeks before. But they will lose a day in preparation for Florida. Now, of course, they've got more analysts and things than we did back in the old days, and they've been breaking down Florida for probably weeks now. But kind of talk about how Mike Norvell and his staff, and for that fact, Billy Napier and his staff will kind of try to turn this thing around, and as they get ready for a game that's going to be played on a Friday, it's going to be played around a holiday, and for Florida State, it's going to be played around several key official visits. But just talk about how the staff for Florida State will turn around after the Louisiana game and prep with losing a day.
Yeah, well, obviously losing a day of prep is a big deal in terms of your process and how you go about doing things. I think what helps Florida State is that it's a noon game against a lower tier opponent, and hopefully the core of the team can be out of the game by half. We're hoping, right? And that so the recovery time will be better for us as opposed to those guys in Gainesville, because they're playing an SEC team on the road, I believe, right? They're coming to Nashville,
Yep.
and so they're playing at Vandy, and Vandy just beat Kentucky, right? And so they have to have their total focus on winning that game. So there's a big difference in terms of that. So advantage to Florida State on that. But yeah, so it's going to push everything back a day. I don't know how Mike's going to choose to do it, whether or not he takes away that day off or not, and makes that a day of prep on Monday, as opposed to usually that's their day off. I imagine that they're probably going to have to, the fact that it is a noon game and hopefully it's taken care of, that they can do that and still have adequate recovery time and able to be in peak performance mode come Friday afternoon.
Well, guys, we're starting to hear about all these preseason awards, postseason, I'm sorry. And of course, Florida, there are a lot of position groups that we could consider most improved at Florida State. But one of the obvious ones is offensive line. The semifinalists for the Joe Moore Award were announced earlier this week. FSU was not on that list. Who was University of Georgia, University of Illinois, Air Force, Michigan, Mississippi State, Oregon, Tennessee, UCLA, USC. All right, I'm not suggesting that Florida State should have been a semifinalist or they should win the Joe Moore Award. But compared to some of the teams that were put on this list, I think Florida State's more deserving. I want to get y'all's take. Florida State ranks 16th in total offense, 16th in rushing offense, 37th in sacks allowed, and 92nd in TFLs allowed. Illinois ranks 59th in total offense, 40th in rush offense, 50th in sacks allowed, and 100th in the TFLs allowed. Mississippi, UCLA or USC is 41th in rushing offense, 56th in sacks allowed. Air Force is 50th in total offense. Now, their other numbers are impressive. Number one, rushing. Obviously, that affects their sacks number. They're 8 sacks allowed. Now, what is impressive about Air Force is TFLs allowed, third in the country. But listen, I sent you guys the stats. Based on that list, should Florida State been a semifinalist for the Moore Award, or were they more deserving than some of the teams on this list? And we all know that awards are subjective, and some of this is most improved award, like Illinois. They've been the surprise team in the Big Ten, but I don't think they belong on that list.
I mean, I imagine this is, an award for. Tell me what is the Joe Moore Award? Is this the coach or is this the offensive line?
This is the best offensive line in the nation.
In the nation, right? Yeah. I think that middle stretch probably hurt. Losing those 3 games on pretty much national TV. Of course, all games are national TV now, but even though we know, because we cover the team very closely, the improvement we've seen, and people outside the program, probably don't understand exactly how far this group has come. That's the only thing I can think of, and it's a lot of it has to do with promotion, who's promoting, who gets on those lists early, that kind of thing. So it is what it is. I mean, I know in for what it's worth that, how far these guys have come, and what, again, this was a joke of an offensive line. The offensive line was the joke of the country 3 years ago. And now they are a dominant force, especially these last 3 weeks. And again, we look at the numbers; those numbers are inflated by the performance of these last 3 weeks too. That middle 3 stretch of games, they performed well, but they were still, we didn't win them, and that probably had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. Fish, just your thoughts on that?
Listen, you know what? When your OC or your offensive line coach is being considered for head coaching jobs, that's to me more of impressive than some I didn't even know that award existed. So it's nothing again. I don't know. I'm not into those type of things. I think the offensive line's done what they've needed to. They're so much improved over what they were even last year. What Atkins has done is truly remarkable. I think he's one of the best O-line coaches in the country. So I think guys like us appreciate what they've done, and I think that's more important than some award that just came out this year or recently. So
it's
I'm
been around for a while.
I've never heard of it. So
listen, I thought they should have been on the list based off who else was on that list. But anyway, I just think that these awards are too subjective, and I don't know who comes up with them. Anyway, I thought that they should have been on that list over Illinois for sure. Speaking of that, Alex Atkins was named a semifinalist for the Frank Broyles Award. It goes to the top assistant coach, which will only raise his visibility. Charlotte, I thought he might have – you mentioned that his name is being brought up with head coaching job. So, first of all, do you know if he was involved in the Charlotte job at all?
It doesn't look that way because they really went outside. I guess they brought
that was as curious a hire in college football as Jeff Saturday was with the Colts. That guy
they came out of left field with that one. So I mean that's a friend of the favor of the family or something. I mean something happened there. But
there's a picture of a goat.
Yeah, I don't know. Man, that thing came out of left field, and I mean, good luck.
I mean, he was not even on the field coach at Michigan. He's advisor to Harbaugh. We're talking about Biff Piggio, and I think that's how you pronounce his name. He is was a very good high school coach in Baltimore who retired. He's also made a ton of money like the guy at Coastal Carolina in investments. He's a millionaire. But he has not coached on the field at college level. It just seems to me with all the young – he's 60-something years old. I'm creeping my way to 60 faster than I ever wanted to. So and I don't feel old at my age, but I was a little bit surprised that's where they went. But listen,
he won a raffle.
He won possibly, or they had some kind of lottery system for this. Yeah. But anyway, listen, before we get into all Florida State subjects, just so prepping you guys for post Florida, FSU could finish 9-3. And there's a lot of games to be played with teams in front of them. But if we were sitting here this year talking about a 12-team playoff, would Florida State be in the conversation? Is I guess what I'm asking. And listen, North Carolina's in front of Mississippi, Kansas, UCLA, Washington, Notre Dame are the teams that are directly in front of them, 13 through 18. And then, of course, we know we're going to see Ohio State or Michigan lose at least one game. Michigan's got a big game this weekend against Illinois. A lot of people think Tennessee's going to lose again. LSU will probably get beat by Georgia. Who knows? UCLA, USC play each other. Somebody's going to lose. Oregon's going to play. And anyway, long story short, there's a lot of football to be played. If Florida State finishes 9-3, and this was a year that we were in a 12-team playoff, would you think Florida State would be in the discussion for one of those spots?
In the discussion, yes. If the discussion is who is playing well in this moment in time, then yes. If the discussion is body of work throughout the year, then there's a conversation to be had. Again, we had our opportunities. FSU had the opportunities and lost out on them. I mean, NC State, we could have that opportunity, but even the way Wake's playing now and the way we're playing now, I'd like to play. Obviously, you would say we'd have a better chance against Wake, even though that matchup seems to be difficult for us. And then, of course, Clemson, the way they're playing now and the way we're playing now. So if that's the conversation, then yeah, we there needs to be a conversation had. I'm not saying we're there, but I would put the way we're playing right now up against any of those other teams for sure.
Well, and that's something that they're going to factor into the playoff when it does expand to 12 teams.
I mean, and that's got to be the thing. Are we saying who are the hottest teams going into this 12-team playoff, or is it for the body of work?
Right. Fish, what are your thoughts? Would you have them in the playoff discussion if we were looking at a 12-team deal?
It'd be tough because you got 5 teams that would automatically get automatic bids, and then you got 7 teams that would have, would get a shot at that large. And you're talking how many LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, all four of those would have a shot at one of those 5 spots. There's one spot left, and like the winner of the loser of the Ohio State Michigan game. I just think it'd be very difficult. Like the numbers would start to shrink. They'd have a shot at the 12th spot, but they'd have to beat Florida convincingly, and I think they'd have to, at that point, you'd have to have a lot of luck.
I mean, you talk about a 3-loss team that would have beaten Florida and beaten LSU, right? Versus a 3-loss possibly SEC school. And as we know, the perception of the SEC is, well, if you lose to an SEC school, that's a good loss. That's not necessarily the case, right? I mean, that narrative is so overwhelming that it's hard for somebody like FSU right now to get into that conversation. Well, but a 3-loss. Go ahead.
I mean, I hate to interrupt you, but they're still trying to beat. There's still a perception that FSU is growing, and they're not there yet. Like those other teams, that it's just a visual standpoint. People watch LSU right now, and FSU beat them, but because they're winning in the SEC, it's just this perception standpoint. I don't agree with it. I mean, you don't, but that's how ESPN and all these networks would just favor these other teams, and that's what we'd start complaining again. The fan base would complain because they'd be like, "Hey, we beat that team." But as well as I do, like it's these other teams have a different standard. They could lose 2 games or 3 games. FSU's not there yet. They're close. They're right in that conversation, but I think they'd be left out. They'd be that 13th team, and we'd all be saying, "Well, why don't they expand to 16 teams?"
Right.
Right. Well, yeah, that's
it's always that team that gets left out is where right. When it was 2 teams, it was like, well, who's the 3rd team, and now it's 4. Now who's the 5th? So it's always that, and when the reality is we probably know who the top 2 are. It's really that 3rd team, which is why to me 4 is probably about right.
Well, the conversations once they do expand to 12 are going to be great because it's going to make, I think for college football fans, it's going to make the season that much more enjoyable because you don't have to win your conference necessarily to get in the playoff anymore. So I think it's going to be fascinating, and just the fact that we're sitting here discussing that this could even be a remote possibility just shows you how far this program has come in the last 3 or 4 years. But
the key would be beating Florida big, and that would get us in the conversation. If it's close or we don't win, then you're out. So
and then you're going to get into strength of conference, ACC versus this conference or that conference or the other. Who's better, Big Ten, ACC? I mean, when you start. They'll get into the minutia all of it. But, yeah, it is kind of fascinating to think that if we were in a 12-team playoff, and I'm really hoping college football will go to it sooner rather than later, just because it does make it makes some of these games, Mark, like we're going to see on Saturday all over the college. It makes those even of somewhat interest, right? Because you've got to play a certain way. You got to beat those teams a certain way, basically to get credit. So, anyway.
That's why Tennessee's going to score 70 every chance they get.
Yeah. Yeah, so it'll be fascinating once we go to the 12-team playoff. But I was just thinking, who would have thought that we'd be talking about Florida season and postseason play, Florida State and postseason play a year and a half ago. Listen, let's go into some other college football topics. And listen, I would be remiss if I did not bring up the University of Virginia and what that school and football program is going through. They had 3 players that were shot and killed earlier this week, a 4th that's in the hospital. Mark, you've been on a program with a team that lost a teammate. I've been on a staff where we lost a player, unfortunately, not to violence, but it was unexpected. You've been through it on more of what Virginia went through with Pablo. All you can say is that your prayers are with the school, with the families of the young men that were either killed or injured. They've canceled the game against Coastal Carolina. And I don't want to – we're going to go back to some happier topics, but just your thoughts when you heard that the other day. Did you have flashbacks to Pablo? What were your thoughts when you wrote it? And listen, there's tragedies that happen every day, but,
Well, I
college
mean,
football teams are so close, and you just feel that void immediately. Just talk a little bit about what your thoughts were.
I mean, my thoughts went immediately to that day when Pablo Lopez got shot needlessly, at a party on campus during our open week. Pablo was my road roommate. I was the guard, he was the tackle. So we would, on Friday nights, we were roommates, obviously close teammate. We were, close as you can be, your teammate. And that day was just the senselessness of it, just the sudden loss to somebody making a decision to do some random act of violence just out of spite, and it was just crushing at the time. And the way Coach Bowden handled it was incredible. I think the way obviously we galvanized as a team was incredible. But just going back to that time and then multiply that times 3, right? I talked to a friend of mine who has a very close friend on that staff and said that whole team is just devastated. They're a wreck. I mean, the rest of the season is in jeopardy. Not that that matters, but just that guy out of spite going in there and taking those 3 guys is the most cowardly thing I think I've ever. I mean, that's just unbelievable. So yeah, it's devastating. It's devastating. It's the sense of loss and the senselessness of it is just hard to comprehend. And obviously prayers and God's grace on all of them, because it's such a world rocking thing, especially for a young man who has all those guys, right? You're just indestructible at that age, right?
Yeah.
And just the sudden realization that that's not the case is just, there's so many different ways to go on this. It's just unbelievable. Just shake your head at it and you just feel for them totally.
Yeah, listen, I can't imagine. I can't. I mean, I think, like you said, 3 people lost to violence unneeded, and a 4th in the hospital recovering from either gunshot or shotgun wounds. It's just awful. And our prayers to everyone up there, particularly the families of those kids that were killed. Just can't even imagine it. When I got the news, it automatically took me back to walking into the USF weight room 10 years ago and seeing Keely Dorsey die in front of me, Tallahassee kid that was a running back at South Florida. Just you're so close, and as a team, as coaches, as players, I just feel for those guys so badly right now, and hope that they're able to recover and move on. But that has certainly got to be a hard thing to go. It is a very hard thing to go through. And like you said, Mark, thoughts and prayers with that staff, those kids, that university, and that community. But moving on to some other college football topics, there is really no good way to segue from it. But we did want to bring it up because we would be totally we talk about college football world all the time and everything that goes on. So I did just want to talk about that quickly. Listen, guys, we always talk on this show about what's going on in the coaching community. Been a lot of chatter about Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss and going to Auburn. And, of course, there's every time I got a buddy of mine that's a huge Auburn guy and seems to be well-versed in what's going on up there. And he was expecting an announcement on Kiffin earlier in the week. That has not happened. Just want to ask y'all's opinion. Does Lane Kiffin to Auburn make sense? Or I'm kind of thinking that, if you're Lane Kiffin, do you want Bama or Texas or someone? Are you waiting on one of those jobs to open?
Go ahead, Fish.
This is what you have to deal with Kiffin. It's like every 2 years he has his bags packed the moment he joins a new program. And that's, as a fan base, it's unsettling because you never feel like you're going to see this thing through. Kiffin's going to be interested in Auburn because it's probably an easier program to win at than Ole Miss, and he wants to keep winning. And one of the things is he's not, I mean, you've seen it. He doesn't love to recruit. He likes to recruit more out of the portal than the high school kids forget about it. He's not even really recruiting those guys. So it's probably just an easier thing to just flip over to Auburn and take that job. But man, are they going to have to pay a lot of money? I think Kiffin's buyout just alone is $30 million. So Auburn, they're about to spend a lot of money if that's where they're going. I've heard the name Hugh Freeze too. So they are basically going after a big gun in this round of, this cycle. So they're going to try to get one of those two guys from what it looks like.
Yeah, it looks like Deion's out of the mix there. But Marty, you think Kiffin's a fit for Auburn, or you think he's a guy that's trying to leverage Ole Miss? Because if I'm Lane Kiffin, my thought is Nick Saban can only coach for so much longer, right? At some point, he's going to get tired of the NIL. And you got to think that Kiffin would want a shot at the Alabama job.
Far be it for me to get in Lane Kiffin's mind. I don't know what his ambitions are. Like Fish said, he jumps, he's got his bags packed the moment he steps on campus. Now, the other part to consider is Auburn's situation with that fan base and that booster group. What's his stomach for dealing with all that kind of stuff,
Right.
because that's a consideration. Obviously Auburn may find out that they're not as highly sought after as they think, and they're going to have to pay through the nose. I mean, I think they're still paying Gus, right? Are they still paying Gus? I think so. I believe so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And now they're paying Harsin, and now they're going to have to buy somebody's buyout and then pay their coach and then their staff.
It's about $150 million between the three.
Yeah, I mean, so economics, but they seem determined to get this thing turned around. So I don't know. All that being said, what are Lane's ambitions? Like you said, there's eventually Alabama's going to open up. He's already had the USC job. That was one of his dream jobs, right? So does he want to go back to the NFL? I don't know. So why not Auburn? Sure, I can see him taking Auburn and then 2 years later going somewhere else. I mean, that's Lane Kiffin.
I just got a message as we're sitting here that the Ole Miss rival site is expecting Kiffin to accept Auburn's offer due to NIL concerns. I don't have time to look it up right now because we're taping the show. But
he's going to turn him down? Is that what you said?
That he's going to take the Auburn job.
Oh, he's going to take it.
How did Ole Miss run out of money? I mean, this is a program that had no problem paying kids under the table. Now they can't pay them on top of the table.
Well, hey, I've also got a source that tells
they're not buying my service, so I don't care.
Do I?
I said they ain't buying my service, so I'll say that.
You're not worried about them, huh? Hey, now I've got a friend of mine that thinks that, and they're connected in the football world.
Yeah.
That thinks that Deion is a legitimate candidate at Colorado, and that he is probably not a legitimate candidate at Georgia Tech or Auburn. Could you guys see Deion being a fit at Colorado? It certainly is. It'd be a no-brainer for that program because it gives them a lot of buzz real quick that they don't have. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my immediate thought is, who is a fit at Colorado? All right. It seems like their best years have come, I don't know, with Bill McCartney, I guess.
Yeah, Bill McCartney and the guy that came from Northwestern.
Right.
Hawkins. Was it Hawkins?
Yeah. Well, no, Hawkins came from Idaho State or Boise State. Yeah. So, I mean, Colorado.
Gary,
where are you going to get players? Yeah, Gary Patterson. Where are you going to get players from Colorado? You're going to get them from California, in Texas.
Where you have to go, right?
Now, Deion probably has good connections in Texas. I don't know about his connections in Colorado. Of course, it all comes down to the staff that you can hire to bring with you, which means you need West Coast kind of guys. And so I guess because of Deion's profile, he probably could recruit Texas pretty well. And I don't know what coaches he can bring with him. So that's the big question when you're hiring a coach.
I mean, I like Boulder. I've been there. The one thing for whoever comes into Colorado, it comes down to the administration. Academically, it's not an easy school to get kids into. So they got to lower some of their standards and want to commit to winning football. Like the people above, if they're going to bring Deion in, he's not going to do it unless he's allowed to bring in whoever he wants outside of like somebody out of the penitentiary. But I mean, like, they got to give him the ability to recruit. That's the biggest problem. The one coach that's now at FIU, he had a 10-win season a few years ago, and you can win at Colorado. It's a nice school. It's I think you could get direct flights. into Denver and Boulder. It's not a hard place to get people into and out of. They should be able to be better than they are. They're terrible. Like they couldn't beat schools in the Sun Belt right now, and that shouldn't happen at a school like that. There's too much. Their facilities are really nice. They do have money, but it comes down to a lot who they can bring in as far as recruits. If they can't bring in recruits, it's not going to matter what coach they bring in. It'll just be the same thing.
Well, it is a beautiful campus. There's no doubt about that. You would think that there would be a draw to that place. But, yeah, that's one of the names I've heard. And then, obviously, I've heard Deion's name in the mix at Ole Miss. If Kiffin were to leave, I've also heard him in the mix at Memphis if they make a change. So his name's being bandied about everywhere. I just wonder if Memphis were to come open, if Atkins or Dillingham would have a shot at it. Both of them have connections to Florida State, obviously. Alex Atkins, offensive coordinator at Florida State. Dillingham was the offensive coordinator at Florida State, so that's going to be interesting. Anyway, the whole coaching thing is going to get fascinating here in the next everybody's pretty much going to want their guy in house probably by December 15th. At the very latest, early national signing day is December 21st. Listen, we have to talk about this because it's a national thing, and let alone a Florida State thing. But Jimbo Fisher is now 3-7 at Texas A&M. Got beat by a interim staff on the road at Auburn last week. Their offense was pathetic.
I picked it, by the way.
What's that?
I picked it.
Did you really? I did not.
Yeah.
I was all in on Casey.
Y'all laughed at me. Y'all laughed at me. You mocked me.
I just said I'm not. I was like on the fence with that one.
I got
most. I don't mock you, man. Come on, man. I have total respect for you.
It was just so hard for me last week to wrap my head around the fact that a guy that has only been coaching as few short of years as Cadillac Williams could go in and beat a guy that's been coaching as long as Jimbo Fisher. And Jimbo Fisher is supposed to be this offensive guru, one of the brightest minds in all of college football over recent history. And they're 3-7 and not going to a bowl game. So I say all that to say this. Is there any chance, and I'm not suggesting that he would be fired, but is there any chance that Jimbo Fisher is coaching somewhere other than Texas A&M next year?
I don't think so.
I don't know how they would get their agreement to leave.
Listen,
he would have to leave on his own, and I don't see that happening. I don't see him throwing it in saying.
I mean, he's owed so much money,
$86 million,
and at the end of the day, if Jimbo has pride, and I'm sure he does, that I just think he's gonna have to relent and finally give in and hire an offensive coordinator and go that route and just keep collecting. Because they do have a lot of players that are young and that are talented. He's got to feel like he could turn that around if he believes in himself, which I know he does. So I don't see him just giving up $86 million just because he had one losing season there. I just don't see that happening.
Well, Fish, a lot of guys in coaching. Are you hearing any gossip about who could end up where that we have not covered? Other schools, there's a ton of jobs open right now. There'll be more coming, but
you'll hear the names. I think there's always going to be guys like you brought up, Tom Allen. Here's a guy I think that's done a very good job at Indiana, but their fans say, you're only going to have a winning season there, maybe two, and then all of a sudden you're going to have a drop off. Does he decide, hey, listen, man, do I put my name in the hat at USF? Because I think he'd be a great fit there, and I think it's easier for him to win. Now, it's not a Power 5 school, but how much success is he going to really have at Indiana? And I know he's from there, and he has a lot of he loves the state of Indiana, but that's tough. All of a sudden you have one or two bad seasons. These fans want to run you out. They forgot about the one good season or two good seasons you've had at that program. But I expect more jobs to open up, and you're going to see positional coaches that are going to move around as well. That we know. There's guys that I know on other staffs I think would be great additions to certain staffs if those staffs get fired. So we'll see what happens, but I don't expect the coaching carousel. I know there was a lot of early firings. I expect to be a lot more after next week. I'm sure there'll be at least 10 to 12 more schools that decide to go in a different direction.
Yeah, hey, listen, and I think that if I was Indiana, I'm trying to get Tom Allen to stay because I think you will get those couple years where they do cycle up, but they're always, like you said, that program is going to be up and down, particularly on that side of the Big Ten. The Big Ten, I think, for parity's sake, in that conference, they need to go to a non-divisional format, like what the ACC is next year.
Yeah, when we spoke to Chiano, they are going to that. I think they're either going to go to like 4 divisional pods, and then they're gonna break it up. It's not going to be the 2 sides anymore, especially once UCLA and USC jump in. They are going to switch it around because you look at some of those schools, Rutgers, for example, they're on the hardest side. Like they got to play Ohio State, Michigan State, I think Penn State every year. Like, I don't care who you are at that program, you're not going to win but 6, 7, maybe you get lucky with 8 wins if they have 3 Sisters of the Poor that they play out of conference. But it's tough to win. I mean, I just don't think people realize it's tough to win at these programs. Everybody's like, oh, we'll win 9 games. Like 9 games just is you flip a coin. It's not easy to get there.
Hey, by the way, the Big Ten West is doing their impersonation of the ACC Coastal. Not this year. Coastal's pretty much decided. North Carolina's going to win their division, but Illinois is 7-3, and they have the best. Well, they're tied with Minnesota for the best overall record. But right now, Purdue, Illinois, and Iowa and Minnesota are all. I don't know what the tiebreakers are in the West for that league, but those guys are all tied for first in the Big Ten West, and Iowa cannot score a touchdown.
Hey, Pat, I had the right idea when I took Nebraska and the fact that anybody could win. They just happen to crap the bed. I can't.
Hey, they're only 2 games out.
I know, but I'm just saying that side really was wide open when we had this discussion before the season. I think I don't think anybody picked Illinois, but there was a few other teams. I picked
Iowa, so I'm embarrassed as all get out.
Listen, if it was a baseball team, you'd be doing real well right now because they win games like 7-6. So.
Well, listen, and they close out with that. I think that every team on that in the Big Ten closes with 2 conference games. So listen, it's going to be fascinating to see who has to play Ohio State or Michigan in that championship game. But all right, so that moves us right into game picks, and our first game actually is the biggest surprise in the Big Ten this year: Illinois at Michigan. Mark, I'll start with you. Any chance that the surprise team in the Big Ten will surprise Big Blue on Saturday afternoon?
No, I don't think so. I think Michigan's just too. Team with the best players usually wins, and Michigan just has an overwhelming amount of better players than Illinois does. Probably too many holes for Illinois to win that game.
Fish, who you got?
On which game? On the Illinois? I missed that for a second.
Illinois at Michigan.
I just think Michigan's too good of a football team right now. They're past that point now. Watch them go out and lose to Illinois, but I think they're in that stage where these type of games, they're the better team. The better team usually wins. I just think they have too much firepower on both sides of the ball for Illinois. Illinois had a great season, but you've seen those struggles in certain parts of the season against certain teams. I think Michigan's the best team they've played so far. And it's going to be probably closer than the number says, but I expect Michigan to win.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Michigan too. I think they're just too much. I think it's interesting. Listen, I think there's supposed to be some bad weather up in that part of the country this weekend. Those could impact games. I know they're talking about
lots of snow.
Yeah, lots of snow. So that'll be interesting. But and I do wonder, will it be closer because Michigan's already setting its sights on Ohio State, and this is not a typical Illinois team that they faced recently. I mean, this is the best Illinois team they've faced in a long, long time. So it'll be fascinating. I think it'll be a fascinating game given everything together. But I'm going with Michigan. All right. Well, we talked a little bit about this earlier. Florida at Vandy. Obviously, Vandy shocked the SEC when they beat Kentucky last week, and they beat. Listen, it was not a fluke win. I mean, they won that ball game. Any chance that they will beat the Gators at home? The Gators are a 14-point favorite.
Yeah, there's a chance if Florida becomes less than focused on Vanderbilt. And good for Vanderbilt to win an SEC game. They were hapless up to this point. So, but I don't expect that'll happen. I think Florida's, again, it always comes down to Richardson. You get the good Richardson and the bad Richardson. If you get the bad Richardson, you got a chance. You got the good Richardson, there's no chance. So I just don't think Vandy's good enough on defense. And offensively, they struggle, even though Florida does struggle on defense. So I'm gonna go Florida, and I hope it gets done early because I'm sure there's gonna be an influx of Gators in Nashville, and I'm just gonna stay inside all weekend.
Fish, who you got?
I just, the last 2 weeks, Florida's played very well. The A&M game, they played very well. They finally got it rolling. And then last week, they put it on to South Carolina. They seem to have finally turned that corner of that inconsistency, good game, bad game, good game, bad game. And they're beating the teams now they're supposed to. I think Florida will beat Vanderbilt. And this one, I think, will be actually a pretty convincing win this week against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Florida's getting better as the year goes on, and I think that they will take care of business. And listen, it's going to be – Vandy has not won an SEC game at home in like 2 years, so they are trying to break another streak. They obviously had not won on the road in several years and took care of that against Kentucky. But I think Florida's going to be too much they got some momentum. They got
Commodore Stadium is like the Hard Rock Stadium North. It's like the visiting team fills the stadium.
That's true. That's
so,
true. And when there's nobody there, it's a very strange place to play. When it's half empty, I've been up there for that before. Yeah. For sure. All right, not a whole lot of compelling games in the ACC this week. Probably the best one is NC State at Louisville. I'm going to take NC State, although Louisville's one of those teams that get streaky, but they just got beat up by Clemson. They got a quarterback that had to come out of the game, and NC State looks like it's got a guy that's going to be good down the road in that freshman quarterback. But I'll go with NC State over Louisville.
Where's it at?
At Louisville.
And Cunningham's out.
Well, he came out of the game. Listen, he doesn't look healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, this is a tough one for me to pick. I mean, they're very similar in that they play a similar type of defense. They attack. They're good on the second level. Just an okay running game on both sides, and they're very quarterback dependent. And it looks like NC State is settled there now with the freshmen. So, yeah, I'll have to pick NC State too, I think.
Fish.
Anytime you have a game like this, defense travels. They have a very good defense. If Cunningham plays, I would take Louisville just because I think he's a very good player and at home. But the fact that he's not playing is a little bit concerning. I do think MJ Morris is playing well, so I look for that to be an upset kind of win because it is on the road in the ACC. So I'll take NC State at this week.
Yeah, well. Now, the game that is going to be intriguing just because it could be a guy that seat gets hotter if he loses, but Oklahoma State goes to Oklahoma. The Sooners have to win one of their last two games, either against Oklahoma State or Texas Tech next week, to get the bowl eligibility. I never thought I'd be saying that at the beginning of this season. We always talk about the surprises, good and bad. This was not a surprise that I saw coming. Okie State has been inconsistent the second half of the year. Can Oklahoma get bowl eligible against the Cowpokes? Mark?
I mean, none of us saw this coming with Oklahoma, and didn't realize the impact all those transfers had coming out of that program and how much they were going to struggle. I think Oklahoma State's the more settled team, even though they have been inconsistent. I'm going to say, to your question, no, they're not going to get bowl eligible. I think Oklahoma State takes this one.
Fish?
Yeah, I just think Oklahoma State's a better football team. I've watched Oklahoma this year. I'm not putting it all on the head coach. I mean, they're just not a good football team. They're not good on defense. Offensively, they're so inconsistent. Even last week, against West Virginia. They played well in moments, and then when they needed a big player, they needed something to happen. The team didn't get it done. It's been a bad fit, I think, with the quarterback there. I do think he'll get it turned around. I'm not worried about him getting fired, but I like Oklahoma State. Just more established and more settled program. I just think Gundy has that program in a better shape, and I look for Oklahoma State to win the what's it called, Bedlam or whatever.
Bedlam, yes.
Yeah. So I expect Okie State to pull out the win.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the mullet over the Madman in this one. I'm going to go with Oklahoma State over Oklahoma, even though Oklahoma State has not been great of late, but I think they're better than Oklahoma and playing with a lot more confidence.
It is a rivalry game. You got to throw the records out.
Yeah, Texas was a rivalry game too, though.
Speaking of rivalry games, there's probably the two biggest games in college football this weekend, particularly as it pertains to ranked on ranked teams, and then obviously the college football playoff. But number 7 USC goes across town to take on number 16 UCLA, who got kind of caught up in a trap game last weekend and lost to Arizona and Jed Fish. But Fish, who do you have in the USC UCLA game?
All right, I'm taking the over, and it's at 76 because listen, USC is really good offensively, but they are not good. They're better than UCLA on defense. I'll say that. Like UCLA, very good team. I like their quarterback. I think Charbonneau, their running back's one of the best. Chip Kelly, but man, they were terrible on defense last week. I mean, it just. USC's at least gotten a little better on that side. I expect a shootout. I expect USC to win in the end just because I do think they have the better quarterback and the better offensive weapons. This thing's going to be a shootout. Like I said, 76 may be covered in the first half. These teams have no defense. You could watch it now be 6-3 the final, but I doubt it. So.
Yeah, the spread's 2.5. They both average 500 yards offense per game, and neither defense is great. But that being said, I am going to go with UCLA. I think they're maybe a little bit better on defense than USC. But listen, I heard somebody said this yesterday on television. This might be the best uniform game all season. Both teams will wear their home uniforms in this one, and it's always a fun game to watch because of that. But one of the first games I remember watching as a kid was a primetime USC UCLA game, and I've always followed that game since.
Me too. So, that's funny. Yeah, I said me too. I remember that when I was a kid, just watching. Man, those are bright colors.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm just gonna go with the last team with the ball wins, whoever that is.
That's fair enough. All right. So the other game that'll have implications nationally on the college football playoff rankings will be Utah, number 10 Utah at number 12 Oregon. Can Oregon bounce back from their loss last week to Washington, who's obviously another one of the surprise teams in college football? But Oregon is a 2-point underdog at home, which they seem to play a lot of games at home. I can't imagine. I don't think I've seen them play once on the road. But they are a 2-point underdog at home against the 8-2 Utes. Mark, who you got in this one?
This is a tough one. Utah, physical team, well coached. The flash that Oregon has with Bo Nix and the way they're rolling there. I watched a little bit of that game against Washington, and I don't know. I think defensively they just couldn't cover anybody for stretches there, which is unusual. So I'm going to pick Oregon at home, and because I don't know that Utah necessarily can take advantage of that as much in terms of throwing the ball. So I'm going to take Oregon.
Fish.
Yeah, the thing with Oregon is frustrating. You watched them last week. The constant going for the fourth downs and not kicking field goals, leaving points on the field. I'm all for this. This idea that if you get fourth down, you go for it, but not on every play. If they do that again against Utah this week, they'll lose again. I think Oregon's a better football team right now. What I saw from them last week at Washington offensively is Bo Nix healthy. I don't know. He got banged up in that game. I think Utah's a physical team. Mark brought that up. They were the more physical team last year. I expect Utah to win a close game here. I'm going to take Utah in this game, though, at Oregon.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you. I think this will be one of the tougher teams, at least from a physicality standpoint, that Oregon will have played all year. Not that Oregon is not tough, but I think Utah will match Oregon's physicality. I doubt that's happened very much this season. And so I'm going to go with Utah in a tight one, too. So I agree with you on that one. All right, so the game of the reason we are here is because Florida State is playing Louisiana, and I think we all are expecting Florida State to win. So I'll ask this question this way. They are a 24-point favorite against the Ragin Cajuns. Will Florida State cover the spread would be the best way to ask this question. Pick this game.
Yes.
So Mark's got them covering 24. Fish?
Yeah, this is going to be a 42-10 type game. I don't see it being close. Just Florida State's rolling right now, and when teams are hot, you stick with them. I think they're on the hot side of this thing, and they win pretty convincingly.
I agree. I think they're going to be a convincing win, but I think they're going to cover the spread because Louisiana will, because Florida State hopefully is going to take care of this thing by half, and we're going to start seeing a lot of younger guys get in there, and we'll see Louisiana have more success than they would have otherwise. So I'm going to go right under. I'm going to say they're going to win by 22.
So you're saying they're going to score a touchdown, something that last three teams haven't been able to do, or except Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I'm going to say they're going to score late when people are out of the game.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm just going to say, I think that Florida State's going to try to take advantage of this team early, get Travis and some of the top tier guys off the field for getting ready, save them for Florida. And I think that will be the only reason Louisiana hangs within the spread. But Florida State will win in dominating fashion. But I just think that, we're having fun with the numbers now, not necessarily.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's I'm going there. But hey, guys, I appreciate y'all joining us. I hope that our viewers and our listeners have enjoyed another episode of the Osceola Tailgate. Mark and I will be back for a quick first impressions after the game on Saturday, and then of course we'll be back next week to preview the Florida game as everybody heads into Thanksgiving and the holiday season is here. But hope that everyone has a great Thanksgiving if we don't catch you next week. But Fish, Mark, as always, enjoyed it, guys. Mark, I'm going to let you sign us off as always.
Go Noles.